Hi everyone, welcome to Inventive Mind. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Gayani. I am an intellectual property and business law attorney. And this channel is for entrepreneurs, professionals, and all the interested parties, I would say, because I bring in interviews with people I find interesting. Sometimes those are entrepreneurs, business owners, sometimes they are other attorneys. So today I have such person, another attorney friend of mine, and I asked him to come join us on this interview because he is a local bar leader. He do a lot of leadership development stuff. He's very experienced, so I always like to bring those people into talk about their path, their journey, and what they do and why they step up to volunteer their time. And he's currently running for the San Diego County Bar Association board. So I thought this is a good time to ask him about this. So that's why I kind of asked him, can you just do it right now? So here he is making time. Like with anything else on my channel, this is for informational purposes only. If you have a specific question for George, I will put his information below, and my information will be below this video too. So thanks for joining. And George, thank you for joining me today. Uh,
Thanks for
you know,
having me.
and I think we have known each other for a few years because I also have done a lot of bar stuff. So I know I have definitely see you at like annual dinners and networking mixers. And
Yeah,
right now, of course, we hardly see anybody other than on Zoom.
fortunately, that's the case right now. Yes.
It's like, so George, tell me, what kind of a lawyer are you?
Uh,
What kind of law do you practice? I just
my
always
primary
kind of like to get my audience to know that.
my primary practice is in estates and trust. So I do a lot of planning and administration in that area. However, I've been a solo practitioner for my entire career, and it's interesting because you start off wanting to do one thing, and life turns you in a different direction based on how it is. When I started off, I wanted to do more criminal defense work. And I started off in that, and I was talking to people. I was in Los Angeles and I joined
Uh-huh.
a networking group, different professionals. And at that time, we had optometrists, we had bankers, we had mortgage brokers, real estate professionals, just photographers. It didn't matter. We just wanted to have somebody from every area. And we
Mm-hmm.
all had referred each other business. And at that point, professionals don't really refer a lot of criminal activity. That's a different subset. So I was getting more requests for wills or estate plans, and so I started doing a lot of research and educated myself in that area. And so once I started that, it started taking off, and then most of my practice has been word of mouth over the year. And so that's really how I've gotten in there. But I have done a lot of criminal work, and in the family law area, prenups and postnups are also big also. And so those are
So,
my
so you
practice.
do litigation also, huh? Not just transactional. You have a
Um,
mixed practice.
yeah, a lot of it is when you're in criminal law, obviously you're in court a lot and frequently, but most things they do settle outside of criminal trials. I have done
Okay.
trials, not very many of it, and it's not a big portion of my practice. One
Uh-huh.
thing I do like to focus on is a resolution. I like to create the win-win scenarios. And a lot of times in litigation, that's not
Uh-huh.
possible. You have clients that hate each other and they want to punish each other, so you're not going to be able to reason with them. But I think most people, when it comes down to it, they really want to solve problems, avoid expense, and then
Mm-hmm.
settle their case. So that's where I've really focused my practice.
See, I love that because I do think it's true. Like I do business law, it's transactional and intellectual property. And I tell my clients when I'm usually in the startup space and starting companies. So, but I tell them like what's really important is we want to look at whether is it because I get consults where people will be like, oh, I want to send a cease and desist, I want to do this. And I sometimes ask them, was like, of course, for trademarks, you do have to protect your trademark rights, but there sometimes you say, oh, I want to sue my business partner. That's why, they came to you. And I'm like, okay, what is the outcome you're looking for? Like, is this somebody you were friends with? Are you ready to walk away from that friendship altogether? you know like, and also I tell people, like, you want to think about the litigation cost, because it can snowball really easily, right? So if you are upset about a couple of $1,000 what they
Mhm.
did to you, but if you're looking at a $10,000 bill with the litigation, is still worth it to you, right? So
Right. Yeah. People don't take that into consideration. And it's not only financial, it's the friendship costs, family
mhm,
costs, relationship costs, and even business costs. It's going to affect your business.
exactly.
Mhm.
And the emotional cost, right? Because when you are in a litigation situation, you are like taxed with the emotions, because you're going back and forth, and so I mean, that's why I don't do litigation.
Absolutely. I avoided it at all costs. And I do tell people it is expensive, but on the cases that I have been, I really think they could have been settled. It's just that people are so angry at each other, and that's
Yeah.
how they want to see it. And unfortunately, sometimes that's where it goes. So, mhm.
So I just we were just chatting a little bit right before we started recording this, and you mentioned you actually had a case in LA yesterday, Los Angeles. I'm just kind of curious, how is it too? Because we are taping this in October 2020. We are in California. We are still partial shutdown, kind of like restrictive movement, not
Yeah,
completely open. So I'm kind of curious as how is it to go into court right now with all the like everything was shut down for a while, and LA do have more cases, COVID cases too. So,
right. Well, it's interesting. I'll tell you to start. It was LA County, and the courthouse was actually Downey. So it was in the city of
okay.
Downey on Imperial Avenue. And it was a criminal. It was a motion to set aside a conviction from 15 years ago. So
Oh,
that it was
wow.
interesting. But focusing just on the actual courthouse and experience, I actually enjoyed it. Other than the drive, once I got there, it was fairly easy to go in. Obviously, you're required to wear masks.
Mm-hmm.
Some It wasn't a full like arraignment calendar, so there weren't a
Okay.
lot of people, but there were motions. So we did have 10 to 12 different parties, but they were required to stay outside. And the attorneys went inside, and I spoke with the prosecutor ahead of time, and I discussed what we were going to do before the motion. And it was actually really nice because I got to socialize with the other attorneys. I socialized with the prosecutor, with the court clerk, the staff,
It's
and it
been a
was
while,
enjoyable.
right? Now
It
you
had been.
appreciate these things.
Yeah, it really was, but it seemed to go, smoothly. Then, of course, the motion was called, and then I had the client come up, and he had to stand behind it at a podium in there, and then
Uh-huh.
I argued the case. And fortunately, I happened to win that one, which was good. But that's just on a personal note that made it that much better. But it really was good to socially interact. But I understand we still do have to take a lot of precautions. I have another hearing tomorrow that's in LA also,
Oh,
and it's
wow.
telephonically, so that
You don't
video,
have to
so
drive
up teams. So I'll see how that one goes too. But we just take it. We have to roll with the dice and with the punches during
one
this
at a
time.
time.
Right.
I actually, before we get into the some of the bar activities, I actually do wanted to ask you, did you always wanted to be a lawyer, or what made you go into law?
I think so. As far as I can remember, even back in high school, I did. And, I always had the idea of thinking, yes, this is a good area. It's something that's interesting and fascinating. But I think what really solidified it is one time I got a citation, a traffic ticket,
Uh,
and I disagreed with it and I fought it. And I felt
uh-huh.
like I didn't really have a good opportunity to have my case heard. And I felt that it should have been believed and I should have
Uh-huh.
won. And that really, whether or not that was actually the case, because I know a lot of people who get traffic tickets maybe feel the same way. But at that point, I said, I want to learn about this because I don't want to be subject to the whim of, other people who are deciding my fate. And I want to be able to do that. So that sort of was like a fuel that started it. And
Uh-huh.
then I kind of progressed from then. So I went to undergraduate and I majored in political science and then went to law school afterward with that.
It's and I was did you go to UCLA? I just kind of I forgot to like check
Oh
your
no, I started here at the University of California at San Diego. So
Oh,
here
okay.
for
Okay.
law school, I went to the University of West Los Angeles in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay, okay. Because I know you had a Los Angeles connection.
Yeah.
I was wondering also that, so, I like to bring this question because for anybody who's watching who might want to like thinking about law, I find that law is very fascinating, and I do think there are areas like you said. Sometimes you go in for one reason and then you change. Because I came to law thinking I will actually, everybody said go into intellectual property, and it was an option, but it sounded kind of boring from other people who described it, which is what I do right now. So it's not the case for me, but it's how they described it. But I also thought, oh, women's rights, because I care about, like, I'm pro-choice. I want to make sure that I work for like Planned Parenthood or something. Well, then when I got to law school, I realized I'm too much of a passionate person to be advocate, a neutral advocate, to see
Right.
the both sides. So I realized I will make myself miserable if I go into that. My effort and money is better spent if I just donate to Planned Parenthood and then do something else.
Right. Right.
Something I mean, I'm passionate about, business and intellectual property, and I have amazing clients right now which I'm loving, because I get to help them create what they want, and I help them, I empower them, and I see myself as a partner in their business. So I'm loving it. But so I was wondering, when you're that self that saw the traffic ticket and what you're doing now, what do you feel like you met the expectations? I know you talked about going into criminal defense and then coming to estate planning, but
You know, it is. I'm still very much an advocate for the underdog, and I still have taken on criminal cases, and it hasn't been in the past year or so, with the exception of the one that I had yesterday, and but I do have. I do have strong feelings that nobody wants to be judged on the worst day of their life, as when they get caught with
mhm,
something, and then that's how they're going to have to be remembered in a certain way. So you want to advocate for them and give people an opportunity. And while a lot of people are kind of hardened and you're not going to change them, there are a lot who do change and go on to do great things. And it's really good to see that.
mhm.
Sort of a segue into that, it's one of the reasons I was a volunteer in the San Diego Teen Court. And
Oh.
it's a program, it's a diversion program where it's basically miscreant teens who are arrested for misdemeanor charges. They're
Mhm.
arrested by the police, and they can either be referred by the police or even the district attorney's office to teen court. And what they do at that point is they have an intake person who goes in and talks about what happened, what's going on at home, what led to these things, all sorts of social things that might impact their situation. And if they want to, they have to plead guilty, but then they come to what they call the teen court hearing. And then that's where I would sit as the judge in the teen court and listen to they would plead guilty.
Mhm.
And one of the best parts about this is that there would be other high school students who would act as quote jurors. So they're not there to determine guilt, but what they
Uh-huh.
do is ask questions, both of, what happened? What led you to this? How were your grades? Why do you
Uh-huh.
think you did this? And then they would also interact with the parents. The parents have an opportunity to come up and speak, and then everybody gets to ask questions at that point. And then after everything's said and done, the jurors retire to a room and they kind of formulate what they think an appropriate punishment would be. But they base it on how are they going to rehabilitate this person so that we can get him involved and not get involved in the adult
Yeah.
criminal justice system. And kids are pretty creative. They can come up with some really good things that adults don't think of because they're aware of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes one of the I guess you would call it penalties, would be that the defendant would have to come back and serve as a juror for somebody else. So it's interesting that they get to see it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes when they did that, you could just see them turn around completely. And so they were very involved. They were excited about what they were going to do. I got to teach the parents lessons about how, culpability in criminal law
Uh-huh.
and how being part of a group could extend their child's liability to what somebody else did to a different extent. So it was a really good program. So I don't know if I answered your question completely, but yes, I think
I
I've
love this
been involved.
conversation. I didn't even know about this program, so I'm just like a curious observer. I'm
Oh,
wondering, is still something that's going on right now, or is this something that happened before?
yes. I did it. I volunteered as a judge for about a 3-year period,
Uh-huh.
and it's run by a group, Say San Diego. It's a
Uh-huh.
child advocacy group,
Oh,
and
okay.
they would hold the hearings in the San Diego City Council chambers. I believe it was twice a month on Thursdays or so. So
Oh,
people would
wow.
sign up, and they had various attorneys who could volunteer to sit as a judge, and do those hearings, run the hearings, explain it, the process, keep the kids in line and keep the parents in line. But we had some pretty serious cases there too. Some that I maybe thought should have been back in actual juvenile court, but
Oh, wow.
they ended up here. So, but I think they have a really high success rate. And I think that's something we should focus on in our own criminal justice system,
Yeah.
in the adult system.
Yeah, because we
And
see also there's a lot of unfairness because there's a lot of more people of color and people, black, people who are in the system for something small sometimes, and then they never got the chance to move, and they kind of fall into that pattern, right? So,
absolutely. Hmm.
and I do think absolutely we need to really seriously discuss, reform, and what we can do as a legal, like part of the law enforcement legal justice system, right? Because justice should be for all. So, um,
I'm going to add one point to that. It's really good. I know there are a couple of measures that talk about um, uh, having a committee that oversees the police and a commission and all that.
mhm,
But I think another really good way to do that is to start in the beginning. We should revamp the San Diego Police Officers Training Academy. So right when people are learning, if they're
mhm,
taught all of these things on how can we avoid this and how can you make sure that this doesn't happen? How can you temper your own attitude and make sure that you're there to de-escalate situations?
mhm,
And even a step further, it's up to these new people to monitor and sort of police the older generation. And sometimes if they can't change and they don't want to change, perhaps it's time to think about retirement because we're in the middle of a big reform. But
yeah.
it's really important that we focus on the justice and focus on making things right. So
Absolutely. Black lives does matter, and that, I absolutely support the causes. And I think, seeing what have been happening, and it's actually kind of quite embarrassing to see all the things that had happened up to this point, and we are in 2020, and this, like, finally, like, there's a lot more people are getting involved, right? Seeing the movement. So I'm hoping for that too, like we can go as business as is, it's need to change. So I think that brings us to the perfect segue to talk about leadership and what you're doing, because I know you are the immediate past president of Tom Holman, um,
yeah.
LGBTQ association. So you could maybe say the right name, because I just call it THLA San Diego. So I'm like,
I
what
think
does
that
the whole thing stand for?
the law association is known as THLA, and it's the Tom
Okay.
Home LGBT Law Association is the legal name. We've
Okay.
made a few changes and added a few more letters and acronyms as time goes on, but it's not officially changed in our papers. But
Oh,
we are expansive, and we want to include more people and more. Yeah, as things go on, we want to keep up with the times. Interesting that you bring it up. You have La Raza of San Diego, you have the South Asian Bar Association, you have Pan Asian Bar Association.
mm-hmm.
Well, why is it THLA? And one of the reasons it was named after an individual was because back when it was founded many years
Mm-hmm.
ago, if we were to have an organization called the Gay and Lesbian Organization, that was too much of a target. It was
Oh,
instantly there, people would go after it, and
mm-hmm.
it was just too dangerous. Frankly, that's how it was. So it started off as almost being, you had to be in the know, because any person who didn't know about it, who would just see the name Tom Homan, they don't know anything per se of what that is, and they might skip over it. But if it
Yeah.
were to say gay, lesbian, gay, LGBT, however it is, that would have been a target. And so that's why it was started that way. And it's sad that it was, but it was the reality of the time. And so a lot has happened since that time. So I think a lot more people are more comfortable like moving. And there is a debate even within our own organization. Should we change the name? Should we not? We have a lot of the old guard who've contributed a lot, who want
Mm-hmm.
to keep it the same. The new ones are saying maybe it's time to revisit a name change. So we'll leave that to the new leaders of that organization and do that. But that's how we started with Tom
Oh
Homan.
wow, I never knew that. I mean, I'm an ally of LGBTQ community because I have a lot of friends who are, part of that community. And I think as a person of color, woman of color, I think we all need to be support each other. We are in a tough time. We are actually just less than 2 weeks away from the election, and
Yes.
it's very much. It's can be a really anxious time. I will admit I'm anxious because I am not a fan of the current administration for so many reasons. As for and I don't think I want to go into that list because it's pretty clear as a woman of color, person of color, as an immigrant, as an attorney who is a progressive, I think is challenging, time when I see people like kids separated at the border, and there's a lot of misinformation out there that's saying this is the same thing that Obama did, and it's not. As an attorney, I can tell you that it's not the laws changed, and but it's really frustrating. So, but going back to, sorry, I had to get that in because I've been so frustrated with some of the misinformation I keep seeing on the internet. So let's talk about the bar leaderships. Like, you're the immediate past president. Why do you like this is not an easy thing to do to as somebody who volunteer my time to other causes. I know how much time it takes. It's your free time. And it's not like attorneys have a lot of free time, right? So why do
Right.
you step up?
It it's good. One of the things in my life, and I learned this, and I talked a little bit about it in my SDCBA bio and why are you running, but
Mm-hmm,
I know I learned lessons from my grandfather saying that, always leave a place better than when you went to it. And that's a good philosophy, I think, for everybody to go by. And if everybody did
mm-hmm,
that, amazing place we would be in. Um, but also, everybody goes through rough times in their life. Everybody has good times in their lives. And one of the ways that you can really lift yourself up when you're down, when you're feeling down, things are rough, it doesn't matter what the scenario is, but you can volunteer your time. So,
yes.
especially if you're in business and you don't have enough business, or if you're, sometimes if you have too much business, you can put it on hold and do something that makes you feel really good about it. And that gives you a reset. And in LA, I volunteered quite a lot. It was at the Jeffrey Goodman Center. It's the LGBT Center in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm,
And that was fantastic because they would allot different 15 or 20-minute slots. So it wasn't full on representation, but people would come in with questions.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes I had a 4-hour stint there. So, and it's a lot of people to go through at one time. But at the end of the day, you realize, wow, you just helped a lot of people. You feel
mm-hmm,
good about it, and you really improved their life. And I can remember a few times when I really did contribute to helping them make differences in their life. And they came back to seek me out. And one lady gave me a book because, I mean, her problem was so simple, but she couldn't resolve it herself. So I drafted a
mm-hmm,
letter for her, and that resolved it. And yet it made such a big difference for her. So it's really important to be involved if you have the skills to do that. And as lawyers, we all have those skills.
mm-hmm.
Here in San Diego, I was just a little involved, not too involved, would go to things here and there. And then I decided to step up. And then a friend of mine, Ariel Javier, he and I decided to get involved, and he was involved in other bar associations.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
yes, and then we decided to go for THLA. And so we started volunteering there, and we both ended up being directors of THLA. At one point, there wasn't competitive elections. I think a lot of bar associations see that you really struggle to get people to
Mm-hmm.
volunteer up to a certain point. Now, I'm happy to say we've had contested elections the last few years, which
That's
which is
really
nice.
good, right? Because it shows people are passionate and they want to get more involved.
It is. It does, and it shows that people like what's happening and they want to
Mm-hmm.
contribute. And it's a good feeling, and you can do a lot more. And so there's a lot of advocacy that goes on. There's volunteer works, but we also try and have a social aspect to it too. So it's good to get people involved and connected. And I think after a couple years, then I was approached by Nick Fox. He's the
Oh, I
leader.
love Nick.
Everybody
He's so
knows
funny.
Nick. Yes. And then he had just asked if I was considering that. And I said, it crossed my mind. And it's one thing to get people to join a bar association, and it's another thing to get them to step up as leaders. So sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it was difficult to even do that. But I decided to just go ahead and do it, and I jumped in. And I think that really changed a lot of things too, because it's one thing to be on the board of directors, but it's an entirely different thing to be a president or co-president of an organization. Um, you all of a sudden sort of get thrust in a semi-spotlight just because you're connecting with all the other diverse bar
Yeah.
leaders, your local politicians, local leaders who aren't part of bar associations but
Mm-hmm.
are prominent attorneys in the area, and you're just involved in a lot of different things and causes. And then you're also trying to manage your own board and get things done,
Yeah.
according to what the policies are for the board. But it was a lot. It was a lot work. It was a lot more work than I anticipated, and it was a 2-year term. But
Oh, wow.
and unfortunately, it ended with COVID, so we didn't get to have my last dinner in
Oh,
April.
no. It's supposed this year, huh? That sucks. Oh,
But that's okay. It'll go on, and the next people it looks like we may not have one this year. We're not sure yet. We're still going to evaluate that. But yeah, we do the best we can given the situation that's going on right now.
I love THLA dinners. They're so much fun.
That's the
Annual,
general consensus of the community. Yes, it is a
I
lot
mean,
of fun. They put in a lot of effort.
I'm part of the South Asian Bar Board. I mean, I'm stepping off as the vice president. I'm just doing a couple of other things now. Like you said, time is limited, but and we have a really fun dinner too because we have dancers and really good buffet.
Oh
So
yes, I was there. I know. It's a lot of fun dancing,
I
and
know,
it's a
but
fantastic.
I think when I think about the annual dinners, like THLA is definitely the champagne auctions and all of that. I like that also you guys have a foundation, that you have a separate foundation that do the scholarships for law students and all of that.
That's correct. A lot of that. I'll just touch briefly on that because
Yes,
it is an
please.
important subject. They did create the 501c3 arm of our organization. Our organization is a C6, I believe, like a lot of other
Mm-hmm.
ones. And the C3 is the where you can write it off if you make a direct donation to it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of attorneys or businesses can donate to the C6 and write it off as a business expense, but I'll leave that to the tax people in there. But the
Javier.
Right. So disclaimer. But the charitable arm, our goal the last couple of years, I think we've given $25,000 per year to
Wow.
law students who are applying, and it's a really good way of ensuring that people who are part of the organization and contribute to it and want to join it or want to do more and maybe don't have an opportunity to do it, it gives them a way to do it, and it's a really good program. And so I would encourage others to at least think about
Donate.
donating. But it has a lot of good causes for it. So
There we go. You heard it. And if you want to know how to donate to THLA, you could always email Jojo. I will
please
put the link actually to the foundation.
found out. Thank you very much. That'd be great. Yes.
just to make things easier. I do know that you have your own practice, and as somebody who have my own practice, I am always buried in my email inbox. So I I appreciate when people are like, understand that sometimes I won't get back to some emails just because if it doesn't need my input, I'm just like, okay, I
Right.
read it and I let it go. So,
I think one of the mistakes that I did is for my office, I have three email addresses.
oh no.
I have one that's just for clients, so I keep that
Uh-huh.
just for work, and then the other for bar association stuff,
Hmm.
legal events, all that. So it's law related, but not client. So it doesn't necessarily bring money into my organization, and that's
Uh-huh.
the one that blows up because once you become co-president or president of an organization, it's sort of a nonstop entity. So I think in retrospect, I probably should have created a separate email just for THLA. And I think some people have done that now. So that's a good thing to do.
Well, that's a good tip, and I think let's talk specifically about the we kind. You kind of reference why you're running for San Diego County Bar, but I would like to kind of give you a chance to kind of talk to people who might be watching this and who may have ran into you at events but don't know like all these different information. Sometimes it's really cool to kind of watch your interview and like, oh, I didn't know about that about George.
Oh,
So
right. No, thanks. Yeah, it's good. I was born and raised here in San Diego. So I've lived in San Diego and Los Angeles my whole life, and mostly San Diego. So I really love this community. I've been a lot of different places around in the US and in the world, and San Diego really is one of the best places to be,
I
from
love it
weather,
too.
yeah, to the people. It's fantastic. So you see a lot that's going on, and I again put this in my SDCBA bio, but I can repeat it here for those
Yes,
just
please.
watching it. It's really important to address all these things. We have social issues, we have medical issues, we have financial issues, we have people hurting all over the place, and we really need to uh, come together and solve problems. And I really want to focus on bringing people together. I know that there are things that have to change, and I think everyone is very well aware of that. And I understand a lot of frustration that people are experiencing and expressing right now.
Mhm.
And one way to do it is really come together with solutions. We talked about it briefly earlier with the police commission, which is on the ballot. But
Yes.
one thing that we haven't really talked about yet is starting at the police academy. And I think that's even more, I won't say more important, but it's just as
It's
important
yeah,
because
together.
right, when you start training people that way and you start people
Hmm.
learning a new way and coming up, it snowballs because everyone underneath them is going to
Hmm.
learn the same things, and you're going to have a much better department. And then you might not have the need for the review. It's always better to change in the beginning the practices rather than punish, a bad result.
Exactly.
And so that's really what I want to focus on. And sometimes it's a matter of bringing our bar association leaders together and then reaching out to our actual leaders, such as our district attorney, Summer
Yeah.
Stephan, our city attorney, Mara Elliott, and Randy Mize with Public Defender's Office. There are a lot of people that care, people who really want to do things. And some, they can make policy decisions that help with this.
Yeah.
So we can come up with some solutions that make sense. That's great. And then one other thing on that, I know one of the things I just saw yesterday and I really loved it was I wrote it down because have you seen the new ad with the governors of Utah, the people running for office?
No, no, I have not.
It was amazing. What they had was they had the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate
Hmm.
both go up together, and they were complimenting each other. They both said they loved and cared. They recognized that the other person loved and cared about their state and the country. It's just that they viewed things differently and how to get them. But they were confident that either one would be good, and they were encouraging people to come together. And that's really what civility should be. And we really need to return to that so we can solve problems. And I really hope whomever is elected there, hopefully they engage that other person and say, let's
Yeah.
come together because we have to bring people together. We just can't have A and B. And unfortunately, politics is so divisive right now. And even within one party, not
Yeah.
everybody agrees along that same spectrum, in one
Yeah.
party. And so it's so hard. and people are so angry. We just need to really focus on solutions and bringing people together.
And I do think it's also important to settle on certain things that are the truths, and it shouldn't be up to, like, for me, it's challenging because I'm a scientist and I see a lot of misinformation out there. And the fact that we cannot, like the advice coming from, it's not relied from the scientists, the top scientists like Dr. Fauci, it's a challenge because they are not being partisan when they say the virus doesn't care if you're whatever your background or your political affiliation or your religion.
Right.
Virus infect the body based on the virus, right? There is
Right.
an incubation period, there is a pathway of infection. All of that is known right now. There's tons of data that came from Asia and Asia and Europe that told us what even in as early as March that this is an airborne virus. But that wasn't what was just spread out.
Disseminate everybody.
Yeah. And it came to a point where people cannot trust what they're getting because there's so much name calling and saying, hey, this is not the truth, this is fake news, when it is the truth. There are, so it's so challenging. And I do think civility does have to come back in because we are all hurting each other by not, relying on people who are trained their lifetimes doing this stuff. So, as somebody who spent 9 years at National Institutes of Health doing biomedical research with these scientists, I can tell you these scientists truly care about what they do. They're not doing it for money because scientists don't make that much money, honestly. So it's really frustrating when you see so much misinformation and challenging like world experts opinions, because we do have the best scientists. We really do have amazing experts in this field who are world leaders, but we are not using their opinion, what they know, their knowledge. So
Right.
I have to go back into that. Sorry, George.
No, I agree. I think it's so important to have accurate information, and it's really a shame that there's so much not only misinformation but intentionally misleading information on
Yes.
so many different levels. And it's
And
sad when you look at the news and I look at it and say, okay, I'm assuming everything's not true, and I have to sift through the pieces to find truth, and that shouldn't be the way it
well,
is.
that's the challenging part, is that there is misinformation weaved in with the truths, right? They are like, I have seen some of these, and you literally gonna have to sit there, red light, like, because if you want to make an argument, because there is truths weaved in with the misinformation. So if you are not talking to somebody who actually know that nuances, they might just say, oh well, that's true, well therefore this must be true, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge right now, and that's probably a different discussion.
Right, right. I agree. Yeah, there are a lot of people who read something and say, "I read it; it must be true," and it's unfortunate, but it,
Yeah.
it happens still, right?
I think when you cannot trust what's coming out of CDC in US, and when it's a big challenge, because because that's like, I do I because I have publications in scientific peer reviewed scientific journals, I still look at those and look at the actual data coming down that, but that's not something like the general public is used to doing or can even do, because they're written by scientists for scientists. So you know so it's a like, it's, if you try to read one of those papers, you're gonna probably pull your hair out, because you're like, what data, like all the experimental models and all of that. But
Right.
that's the thing, so I think that's definitely should be a discussion. I'm actually going to try to see put out some other videos on that. But for this, George, so tell me also, what do you do for like balancing your life? Because you do these bar organization stuff, you have your own practice. So for
Yeah.
17 years, which is amazing. Like, not to age you anything, because attorneys actually, you could be an attorney very young in your 20s, unlike scientists. Well, there are some scientists who become PhDs by end of 20s, but you could be
Right.
actually, because that take longer. But with law, is 3 years, right? So 3-year program, and then you graduate, and you could be a partner at a law firm by 35, because you've been
Right. Right.
practicing for 10 years. So, so tell me, for one thing, first, why did you launch your own practice? Anybody who is a new attorney who is trying to maybe thinking about, or any attorney who's thinking about launching their own practice, what advice would you give? And then we will go to the mindfulness as
Uh,
a close off.
I think, it was interesting because prior to being an attorney, I was a mortgage banker in Los Angeles, and that
Oh,
was in
wow.
finance world, and so that was interesting and good. But when I received my law license, there were almost everywhere was having hiring freezes, and so there wasn't a lot of
Mm-hmm.
opportunity. Sometimes you're just forced to start, and
Yeah.
so I just said, let's do it. As a mortgage banker, you were used to getting your own clients as well, so it wasn't too difficult of a transition, at least to make it. It was just a different area. So I had first started with my networking group as a mortgage banker, and then eventually it went into law. So I just had to really do a lot of due diligence and learn things as I went along. So I did associate with other attorneys, and it's really important to ask those who've been around for a while, hey, what do you know about this? How can we do
Mm-hmm.
this better? What are some pitfalls in this area? And then, advise your clients and move. So that's kind of how I started off on my own in that area and did it. And
And then
then,
as far as the mindfulness, what do you do? Because you're running a business, you're doing leadership stuff.
right. I think the best thing, one of the things I both regret and I appreciate is I was in court more frequently years ago, and I
Mm-hmm.
actually enjoyed it. I enjoy the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy, questioning police on the stand. I enjoy questioning other people. It's good, but at the same time, it also ties up your schedule. And one of the things I really like to do is travel. And so, back to since I'm aging myself anyway, for my 50th birthday, I did
Well,
a big
well,
trip.
you look great. I had no idea. So you disclosed it.
Yes, I did post it, so it's there. But I did do, it was around the world trip, and it was about 2 months. And I don't think I'd have been able to do that having all these court appearances. And I did have a couple, but I did get those covered. And there were a few times on the trip I had to be up at 3 in the morning and, say in Turkey and Istanbul, on the phone talking to people and getting some stuff
Oh,
done.
wow.
But overall, it was still worth it. And I think the ability to get away and travel and see different places, meet different people, and just refresh and reset is a way you can keep your sanity here. And if you're working 24/7 and you don't give your opportunity to have those breaks, you're going to suffer in one way or another. It's going to catch
Mm-hmm.
up with you. So it's really important to take time for yourself and do that. Lately, I was really good about exercising previously, and then that kind of went away again. But now I've gotten back into that, and it's really important because
Oh,
that
that's good.
with your mind too. So when you're missing all the social activities as a social person, I really do. I miss the gatherings and interacting with
Mm-hmm.
people. It can take a it excuse me, it can take a toll on you, and it
Yeah.
does. So it's good to at least exercise and get some of that out. So I do walks and work out at home and stretching and sometimes the yoga that's in there. Starting with that, I'm not an expert by any means on that. That.
Well, I love that. I do. I also do a lot of walking meditations, and I do some running. And so I think, definitely, mindfulness with doesn't have to be sitting at home and just, which I do also 10-15 minutes of meditation with focusing on your breath, but can be working out like, oh,
Right.
yoga, like, and you do yoga for you, not for somebody else to show up your flexibility. So I think that's the important thing to take away as somebody who's not good at yoga.
I was just going to say that it's good. You do that for yourself, probably because I don't want to be embarrassed in front of other people. So I
I
understand that completely.
I have given up. I go to Zumba classes sometimes when the gyms were open, and I could see like there are these old, like like grandpas and grandmas who have really good moves, and I'm all over the place because I'm used to doing kickboxing. So I think it's kind of fun to see it. So I am totally that person. But anyhow, thank you for joining me today, and
Oh,
thanks for
absolutely.
sharing
Yes.
and I for those who watched this whole thing, thank you, and I will put George's information below. And if you like this video, please like, share, subscribe. And there are other videos on my channel, check those out. They're different playlists. So until then, bye.
All right. Bye. Thank you, Yanni.
Here.